Regen Digital AGM. Over to you, Alan.
Great, thanks very much, Wardy. Welcome everybody to the Regen Digital AGM. Apologies for those that were on the RFM Regen Farmers Mutual meeting. You may hear a little bit of repetition from what I'm about to say, but for those that weren't, my name is Alan Beattie. I may have met many or most of you before. I've been working with Wardy and Rowan for about 16 months as a director of the two entities, obviously including Regen Digital. Just to sort of put a bit of order around the meeting today. So first and foremost, I would, I'd like to acknowledge and I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I extend, of course, that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that join us today in this meeting. Again, also an acknowledgement to thank all stakeholders, investors, and parties sitting around at Regen Digital for the shared vision that certainly Wardy, Rowan and myself have for this business. It's very exciting, and we have a pretty full agenda. We've actually got 7 agenda items today, including some Q&A, but we've got a full agenda today, which does focus on some of the business activities in the CEO's report. So please, devote some of your attention, to that and some of the exciting things that are going on. You'll see there the approval of the minutes of the previous AGM. I believe, Wardy, it is correct to say that this is the first formal AGM that we have had. We've had similar investor meetings, but this is the first formal AGM that we've had, so there are no minutes to approve as such.
We had an
we had an EGM, yes, correct. We had an EGM. So yes, there's quite a lot to get through, and we would welcome any questions and answers at agenda item number 6. The agenda item number 3, I do not believe we've got any proxies. Is that correct, Wardy? None has come through. Okay. So without further ado, I will pass to is it back to you, Wardy, for
Actually, Rowan, I think it's going to be, do you want to control the presentation as well, or do you want maybe?
Yeah, might as well, because then you try.
So who am I passing over to Rowan or to yourself?
To me.
To you. Okay, Rowan, over to Melbourne. Thank you, everybody.
Mate. Thanks, mate. And I echo Alan's sentiments. Thank you, everyone, for everyone attending today, but all the broader community as well that has supported all the work that we've been collectively undertaking as we've been pulling together Regen Digital and Regen Farmers Mutual. So what we thought we might do is take you through a bit of a story about where we are and how we got here. I'll just shrink you guys down. So what are we doing? If we just start from first principles, we're effectively building 3 parts, 3 essential bits of infrastructure that our farmers, our members can use to engage with environmental, to create value with their environmental assets. And the 3 components of that are, we start with the Regen Advisor Network. So through Regen Farmers Mutual, we're creating infrastructure to support Regen advisors on the ground to provide the advice that farmers need to better understand their environmental assets and to create value with those assets over time. And what we came to understand pretty early on is that we needed to create the digital technology to enable farmers to manage the data that goes to prove their environmental claims. And so hence that's the reason why Regen Digital came into existence. And what's become particularly clear over the last kind of 3 to 6 months is that we're now moving to create a capacity to help support our farmers in attracting cost-effective capital to invest in those environmental assets. So the three parts of the business that effectively make up the Regen Farmers Mutual Group are finance, Regen Digital as the digital twin, the digital technology that farmers can use to manage their data, and the advisor network. And in terms of Regen Digital, so as you know, we undertook the initial fundraising in December, or just over a year ago now, where we sold down the initial equity interest in order to raise $500,000. And so that was 300,000 through a small scale offer and 200,000 through the equity crowdfunding that we undertook, which introduced 145 retail investors and 3 larger investors via the small scale offer. And we've got some of those folk here today. At the time, post that capital raising, Regen Digital was valued at $3.5 million, which is reflective of the kind of the value that was being created through the mutual in its own right. So it was in December of last year. And in January we started the build process with through our relationship with Open Team in the US, and so we're through working with the developers within Open Team. We're able to build using the technology that those guys had actually started on, and we basically had them repurpose it and refine it to be used as our digital twin technology. And so across the 6 months, we're able to work with them so that we're actually able to launch by 30th of June and open up the digital twin platform for our first members to come on board. In terms of Regen Farmers Mutual at the same time, so as soon as we were able to bring on our first farmers into their digital twin, we actually then got our first members of Regen Farmers Mutual. And of course, the way that farmers become members of Regen Farmers Mutual is by using the products of the group. And in this case, it was getting the digital twins. So we now have 60 odd farmers onboarded. So we have 60 odd members who have been onboarded into the digital twin, and we've been learning through this process as we bring them on, what works, what doesn't, what we need to improve on. And so some of the learnings we've had through this process are that, for example, we came to understand, whereas initially we're very much about seeking to solve the problem around environmental markets, carbon markets in particular, that the carbon market was subject to brokers taking too big a margin in effect. And so there was an opportunity for farmers to come together to create a mutual to kind of retain more of the value. And so we had initially had this idea that like 80% of the value would be retained by the farmer, 10% would go to the local group on the ground who provides support, and 10% would be retained by the mutual, which is owned by farmers, to pay for the costs of the mutual. What we've come to understand is that the farmers first need to understand what their carbon exposure is. So we've moved to this concept of net, inset, and offset. So what we're helping farmers to do is to first understand what their carbon emissions are, their carbon emission balance is on the farm, understand whether they're long or short, and then go, right, well, I need to potentially offset my carbon emissions so I can sell my product as a net zero product down the supply chain. And then down the track, apologies if I'm a little bit, so I've got chest infection, so I'm not thinking as clearly as I might otherwise. So we understood that farmers need to go from first understanding what their carbon emissions are to then, potentially, if they do have surplus credits, be able to sell them down the track. And so that's the idea of offsetting. So we changed our focus from looking at doing carbon transactions to really helping farmers understand their environmental assets, I guess is the best way to describe it. We also changed from calling our advisors, they're now called Regen advisors. We had been calling them landscape agronomists, And we'd come to understand that that was landscape agronomist wasn't a term that kind of was really resonating with folk and was perhaps providing more confusion than help. We're we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a second, but we're actually official case study of the Department of Ag Traceability Hub. So we've been working with the Traceability Hub on an at-call kind of basis, where the team there would give us a call and work through issues that they were facing as they were looking to understand how the government can support the various supply chains with respect to developing traceability, both principally for an export market. And so because of our positioning with respect to Regen Digital, that they were seeing us as a very clear use case that we could that they could work with. And so they're looking at us, and particularly with respect to the McDonald's pilot, which the McDonald's pilot relates to this Tassie to Townsville project that the Fulton's Market Group has been pulling together in anticipation of being able to help McDonald's understand and help McDonald's demonstrate the sustainability credentials of its beef supply chain in particular. And so the Department of Ag are particularly interested in that particular pilot because they're interested in understanding traceability within the beef supply chain. And so those two things coming together have been a useful kind of process, and we'll go through in a little bit more detail what the McDonald's pilot looks like. We've been working with Open Team across this period, and what's really interesting about our relationship with Open Team is this open ag tech ecosystem in the US, and they've just received in the last 6 months a $35 million US climate smart grant from the USDA. And so the USDA is now actively working with this open ag tech ecosystem to develop the tools that we've been working with the Open Team on. And what we've come to understand is that the guys in the US are looking at what we're doing, and they're going, Australia tends to be just that little, in terms of what we're doing, has been a step ahead, so to speak. So we're a valuable use case. We're finding that Regen Digital and Regen Farmers Mutual are a valuable use case that feeds back into that Open Team ecosystem. And the other advantage of working with Open Team is that because of we're working on technology that can be used both over there and over here, we're actually spreading the costs, our development costs, across a broader base. It's one of the advantages, of course, of working in open source technologies. And the other kind of key part of the work we've been undertaking are these landscape impact projects, which we can kind of step into now. So in a sense, we've discovered that there's two key competitive advantages that and channels to market that Regen Digital can kind of pursue in partnership with Regen Farmers. And one of those relates to landscape scale impact projects. And the thing that the mutual is able to do that other organisations in the environmental markets find difficult is the mutual is ideally designed or is the ideal structure for bringing groups of farmers together in a landscape to work together to understand what the environmental opportunity is in that landscape. And so what we've currently got underway is our first landscape impact project, which is underway in Traprock. That started in September. It's looking to come together by the end of March in the first instance. And what where we've got to there is we've been able to identify this kind of replicable transaction structure, or this replicable the highest impact actions that the farmers in that region can undertake that across their properties in a collective manner to deliver ultimately, in this case, a carbon and biodiversity outcome. So we've been pulling together that transaction with the Traprock farmers. There's a group of 8 farmers initially who are and they're leading the process. But there's another 8 farmers sitting behind that, and they belong to a group with 80 farmers, and then in the broader landscape, there's another 800 farmers conceptually. And so you can see that what we're trying to do is to create a mechanism where we can identify the replicable transaction structure that can then be rolled out across that landscape. This landscape impact project approach is what, as I say, it's a competitive advantage for the mutual, because other commercial organisations aren't ideally structured for working with groups of farmers in this way. And so for that, perhaps for that reason, we've been able to get funding in partnership with Landcare Victoria for another 6 of these landscape impact projects to be undertaken across 2023 and 24. And we have a funded project with Landcare Tasmania that we're looking to scope up early next year. We're working with New South Wales, the government there, the PIPAP and what have you, and those guys are perhaps a little bit behind in terms of getting their thoughts together about how they approach this market. But we're hoping that there's some projects in New South Wales, the Western Murray Landcare Improvement Group are doing a great job of pulling together a project in that space. And in the Clarence River, we've got a couple of projects. So there's opportunities in New South Wales that haven't been realised yet by virtue of the funding. And the Land Restoration Fund, who have funded our first project in Traprock in Queensland, have been really interested and happy with the progress we've been making and the way that this is working. So we're expecting that we might be able to get some further projects funded up there. So the way, just to give you a bit of colour about the way that the project's working, so in Traprock, what we've discovered is the current state is that the landscape, it's very hilly, and there's remnant vegetation, if you like, or there's existing vegetations on the hills because they weren't cleared for farming, not suitable for farming, but where it was flat, in the flats is where it's been cleared in order to enable farming to occur. And so what was the opportunity identified working with Southern Queensland Landscapes was to enable vegetation regrowth where the hill meets the flat, and it's called the toe slope. And that particular area is, if we allow for revegetation, it's rich in soil, and it can allow for hydrology benefits, and it can be where and can now enable the regeneration of the type of habitat that's is it most at risk, if you like. Because in the flats, that's where the box gum grassy woodland typically lived, and because the flats have been the area that's been cleared, there's less than 10% around the country of box gum grassy woodland habitat left. And so by focusing on this area and creating a corridor of at least 20 meters wide around these toe slopes, we can create a transaction that supports the regeneration of this landscape across the Traprock and across the 8 farms that we've got in the initial pilot. There's 3,000 hectares of this land, of this particular habitat that could be regenerated in this way. And so and this is certainly highly consistent with what the Land Restoration Fund is looking to do. They're looking to support carbon transactions that have a high biodiversity component. And the thing about this particular habitat, if it can be regenerated, is it does support the endangered species in that particular region, being koalas, quolls, and what have you. So this is just to talk to the scale of the opportunity, if you like. So SQL has mapped, and one of the advantages of working with the NRM in this region is they've got the research and the science to be able to provide the input that we need to really be able to understand what the opportunity is. And so this is a map of the bigger opportunity set across the Traprock. So our initial farms are in the white here, and you can see that they're just a subset thereof of the total opportunity set. The green dots are observations of endangered species. And one of the interesting things is that, like, there aren't many observations of endangered species in this region, suggesting that there is a really good opportunity for regenerating the habitat to support those endangered species to be to increase populations across the Traprock, particularly where these, the farming farming exists. And we thought we might just show you a quick video, if you don't mind, of one of our farmers talking to the opportunity and how he's experienced the Traprock.
I'm Andrew Ferrier. This is property Mallow. I've been here since 1992, and we've converted it from just raw merino sheep into organic lamb production. And in doing that, I've become really interested in biodiversity and the health of the landscape. I've now become interested in what Regen farmers can offer us as a group and as a district. So if we've got, say, 8 properties in the pilot group that we're working with now, so they're like little stepping stones in the district. So we've got them and we'll map them and we'll put them together. But the idea is then to expand that out. Development of the benefit of the environment that we can do with that is just unbelievable. There's hotspots of these biodiversity threatened species areas here. To try to get some connectivity is just going to be so important. So back in the early 1990s, we put together a group called the Traprock Wool Association. That was put together when the wool industry was falling apart. That group, Traprock Group as it's called now, is still in existence, and it's got over 60 members, active members in there. And it's what it's given the landholders is confidence to be part of a project like this. So as a group, we've been talking to SQL, they're the local NRM group, and we're dealing through Regen farmers, and we've been looking for markets because we know we've got the product here, we've got a heap of product, but we need to be able to assess it, we need to be able to monitor it, we need to be able to verify what we've got, report on all that, and then sell it. Different ones here, these grasses have a little daisy. So yeah, that's just part of the assessment process. It's quite comprehensive, but it's what we're looking to do in the future.
Good on you, Andy. So Andy's one of our lead farmers and has been pivotal in kind of bringing the farmers together, not just in the lead group, but also engaging this kind of next ring of farmers. And he's, as you were saying, part of the larger farmer group that operates in the area. So what we've come to understand is that our role is not to specifically help farmers kind of access carbon markets. What we've come to understand is our job is to first help farmers understand what their environmental assets are. And so it's answering the question, what are my environmental assets, both individually and collectively? And then once we start helping a farmer to understand what those assets might be, we can then help them on a journey whereby they can actually create value with those assets. And so the way that the digital twin then comes to be used is to help, is particularly in this first step, is through the onboarding. So what we've been doing to date is onboarding farmers through to create a digital twin. And in that process where they're being through effectively an hour and a half, 2 hours, they have a Regen advisor walking through with them a set of questions that enables them to understand start to understand what their environmental assets are, whether it be carbon, biodiversity, or whether it's water, how their farming practices are impacting those environmental assets. So what we tend to do through this onboarding process is to map their assets and to start asking the questions around what their practices are. So through the onboarding process, it's actually, I suppose, catalyzing that conversation of that first step about understanding your assets. But what that does do is it creates a digital twin that then can be used to do 3 things. One is it can be used to collect other forms of data that can be used to prove your environmental claims or to analyze what your opportunity set might be. And so, for example, we've got an integration with FarmLab, which enables that chain of custody data collection with respect to soil. We're building out the tools that that can be used through the digital twin to analyze the ways you can create value. So currently we have an integration with Look-See. Look-See is the federal government's carbon kind of tool that can be used to get an indicative sense of what the opportunity a farmer has under the 15 ERF methodologies. So you can draw a map of your farm, and the look-see tool through the integration will give a very rough approximation of what the opportunity is with respect to carbon on that land under the different methodologies. And then importantly, what the digital twins looking to do is to then enable sharing of data for green provenance and for to support green provenance and to support environmental transactions, so to prove your environmental claims. And so given that that's the way the digital twin works, the McDonald's beef supply chain project is actually our way to kind of really step into the traceability, the green provenance side of things. So this is a project that's been under development with the Fulton Market Group and McDonald's. We have a trial that's kind of been that we're scoping in Mackay currently, where what we're looking to do is to bring data that's collected in the digital twin with data that's collected through the national national livestock information service. And so what that enables is us to do is to enable collection of data with respect to farming practices, and have those farming practices linked to individual cows that get processed by a processor, who the abattoir. And so what we're able to do is to by combining that data is to enable that processor to then report up the supply chain with respect to ESG, such that down right at the coalface, McDonald's is able to report on its ESG requirements. And so, as we understand, particularly global corporates such as McDonald's are going to be subject to reporting their Scope 3 emissions in their financial accounts by the end of next year. So they have very much a real and present need to be able to report on ESG. And the bit that we see replicated time and again in terms of the problem is the ability to collect this on-farm data. So once the beast or the produce gets to the processor, supply chains are very well set up to report on practices, for example, the carbon emissions with respect to logistics. The difficult bit that they struggle with is how do we go collect data on farms? And we just spent 2 days in Canberra this week with the Australian Farm Institute, National Farmers Federation, and the peak bodies, and the constant refrain, looking at the Australian agricultural sustainability framework, and the constant problem that we kept coming back to was this one around how do we go collecting data on farm without creating huge imposts on farmers with respect to costs. So this McDonald's beef supply chain pilot that we've got kind of under development was the one that is likely to be, if not a leading case study for the development of this Australian agricultural sustainability framework, the operation of that framework next year, in addition to applying it to the National Farmers Federation Farmer Data Code. So the point really is that we're right in the thick of it through the digital twin, in both with government and the industry bodies. One of the advantages of using this the digital twin to share data with with processors is that we can do things like start standardizing the data sharing agreements, and we can standardize those in a way that we're optimizing or maximizing the ability for farmers to assert their rights with respect to how data is shared. Because we've got a system which is enabling the aggregation of farmers' digital twins through the mutual, we have a mechanism to kind of negotiate from the farm perspective how we go about agreeing to sharing those data. So the dual benefit is that we can simplify the way that data is shared. These data sharing agreements are structured, and we can actually optimize the terms at which the data is shared under. Similarly, by having this, again, this point where we're aggregating digital twins to reporting for processes, we can do things like help with the simplification and standardization of data. So there's another problem that's common across the industry is there's many data standards, and we're never going to arrive at a situation where we have one data standard to rule them all. It's the nature of things that, like, we need to have different data standards for different sectors, for example. So we need to have ways of actually translating data between different data sets. And a great example of that is with respect to something as simple as location. Location in the carbon world, you use lot and DP. You use legal boundaries for a property, whereas in the national in livestock world, you use that NLS database, and that's uses property identification codes. So we need a way to actually to translate the lot and DP with the PIC. And so there's ways of doing that we can adopt, again, because we have this interface between lots of digital twins and the processes. We're able to promote that kind of level of sophistication. So what we're able to do through McDonald's is to do things like report on carbon emissions in a batch by farming practice. So we can report how many animals were processed under through rotation versus feedlot. We can do things like report on what the carbon emissions were in a batch and compare that to an average for a benchmark for either that processor, the region, or more broadly. We can report on things like biodiversity. We can ingest data from the Australian Living Atlas and have our farms mapped to be able, as we saw before, and be able to see where the endangered species are relative to our farms. And then we can ask questions through the onboarding process and more generally as to whether farmers have actually seen endangered species on their land, and if they choose to report it, report to match that. So we have this kind of this new data set that's kind of being promoted and developed. And we can also do things like report on the whether farmers are undertaking conservation practices on the land. Again, through this digital twin, as we're setting it up, we can ask questions in relation to whether they've got protected habitat or whether they've got conservation practices happening on farm. Really importantly, the EU has brought in some fairly strict requirements with respect to deforestation, and given that in the beef supply chain, these can be this is becoming an issue in the sense of, in Queensland, for example, clearing has been an issue in the past. And what we can, again, we can grab external data from SLATs, which reports on clearing using satellite data, and we can merge that data with self-reported data from the farms. And so, for example, McDonald's had been suggesting that they wouldn't buy beef by postcode if that postcode had reported deforestation. Now that data is coming from something like SLATs. What we can do is we can have the farmers report on whether they had actually undertaken any clearing on their land, and then have that matched against the SLATs. So we can report on whether there was any clearing undertaken with respect to a farm that a beast has come from, and we can report with it what degree of confidence that attaches to that reporting. And if there's a mismatch, it'll be highlighted. But what that enables us to do is to solve that problem that currently exists, where there's producers being penalised because they belong to a postcode where there may have been clearing. So that's basically where, like, in terms of the two major kind of areas, the landscape impact projects and the traceability. We've just undertaken the Deloitte's Growth Lab process with where Deloitte had contributed, volunteered or offered to take us through their Growth Lab. And through that process, Wardy and I and we're able to be ushered through kind of their strategic, I suppose, lens. And so out of that came a couple of key conclusions, one of which was it helped to identify which areas, this probably wasn't new information, but it helped to have a third party kind of to highlight this. But so, for example, it said that, well, what were the priorities? What were the key things that helped to drive the strength, the competitive advantage of Regen Digital? And the two that really came to the fore, one was that as a mutual, we're able to have partnerships with organizations in a way that really creates a point of difference. And so that's an area of strength for Regen Digital, that we can actually work with organizations in a way that others can't. And so that's clearly an area that we've been working to build upon in the past, and we'll continue to do so. The other was that we that Regen Advisor network through Regen Farmers Mutual was a key point of differentiation, and we need to be able to kind of focus on that as a priority area. And so Deloitte was useful in that. So in summary, the three areas of the group that we're developing and where Regen Digital sits, we've got Regen Farmers Mutual emerging as an organization that's providing support for farmers on the ground, that is starting to generate a revenue stream of its own through these landscape impact projects. And you can see that we've got a pipeline of those projects underway. We have Regen Digital, its product, its initial offering is starting to come together in a way that we're starting to understand the nature of the services it provides today. We're not looking to build the equivalent of someone like Agronomy, who's in market with a 3D, like beautifully designed, but perhaps delivering a different kind of outcome for farmers. Than we're very much focused on enabling farmers to actually capture value from their environmental assets, and understanding that the way they do that is through proving environmental claims. And so we're very much hyper-focused on enabling that element, rather than necessarily building 3D flying models so that allow you to explore your farm. And the third element of a strategy that's becoming clear is that we can see that the need for the Regen Group to create a Regen Impact Fund and trading desk, which will enable us to aggregate farmer market power to access cost-effective finance, flexible finance, to enable them to invest in their environmental assets. And so for example, for the Traprock, we can see that there's going to be a need for that in the shorter term. So that's going to be something that's going to emerge early next year, that will go back to help support the development of Regen Digital in the longer term. And I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Rowan. At this point, I'd invite anybody with questions. We've got probably 10 minutes for questions, and then we need to get into some other formalities of the meetings, like the financials and closing it out. But please, from the floor, any questions that Rowan and I could attend to? Or Alan, of course. Yeah. Well, silence is not something I was expecting. I mean, I guess just to restate, thank you, Rowan, for the enormous amount of work and detail that you went into there. Is it clear to people that, Regen Digital has had that typical startup experience of going, we had a plan and now we've got a new business environment that we need to work within. But through navigating that, we are very clear that it's landscape impact programs, doing things at a landscape scale, and the ability to take farmer data through the supply chain that Regen Digital has as unique selling propositions, and what differentiates us in the market. Was there any questions, I guess, as to or concerns that people had about that strategy that they would like, or strategies?
It's Rose here.
Hi, Rose.
Hello. With regard to data being tracked to meat, is that's going to involve blockchain? Like that's very complicated, isn't it, to go from an entire carcass if it's broken up into, many packets of meat?
Rose, I'm going to attempt to share my limited understanding of how the processing of meat works, but it works on batches of, say, 150 on the shed. And so that you've got ear tags for 150 cattle that might have come from multiple different properties. And so each of those properties might have undertaken different grazing regimes or had different carbon intensity associated with the way those animals were raised. So a feedlot animal, a rotationally grazed animal, a supplemented feed animal, ex-dairy animal, they'll all have different emissions associated with it. But out of that batch, you'll be able to say, well, the average emissions of that batch that was X, Y, and Z. And the way that buyers like McDonald's work is they buy the 30% of the cow that's crap, from the legs below, the trimmings, and the rest of the cow, the, Scotch fillets, etc., end up getting put into butcheries or export or Coles and Woolies sorts of supply chains. So those processes need to find a way, and currently there isn't a way, of knowing what were the conditions under which those animals were bred and raised before they came to the abattoir, so that they can report on that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use blockchain to do that data, but there are probably some good use cases for having an open ledger, a shared ledger, but we aren't anticipating a significant spend or complexity because of the use of blockchain. Right now, it's just not something we need to do. Yeah.
There's probably one thing to kind of talk about, one of the differences between Regen Digital and something like, for example, the AusAg Data Exchange, which is, so there's our general philosophy is that we're pursuing something that's decentralized. We want the farmer to have control of their data. We're enabling the processor to have some software, again, open source, that they can use to aggregate data from digital twins. So that software that we're enabling processors to have, they can either host themselves, meaning that they can integrate it into their own systems. If you're a Tyson's, if you're a very large global, processor, you've got the resources to be able to build that software into your actual processes, or you can have us host that platform for you. The point being, we're trying to create a system that where the atomic bits can be kind of added up and connected in ways that enables for data to flow efficiently. The opposite view that kind of has been explored, but unsuccessfully, is to build one really big database where all the data comes in and then across all the industries, and then gets kind of shared out, which was this I'm simplifying it, but that was the vision behind the Oz Data Exchange. And Morty and I met with large telco recently, and they had a box in the middle saying, this is what we do. And they had a box in the middle, and it was just that similar concept. They just had, we do all these things and all this data comes into us, and then we enable it to be shared out. So there's a philosophical difference, I guess. The point I'm trying to make here is that we come from this perspective of using open source technology, decentralized, that enables flexibility in the way that individual actors can come together.
What may end up happening at a practical level, if you're a farmer, is you'll end up sharing data from your digital twin with your bank, with your local land care organization, with other farmers that you're in a landscape impact program together with, and the supply chains that your commodities go into. And so it'll become relatively something like a social network where who are the friends of my digital twin and what access do I give them? Do they get to see my feed or do they just get to see my photos? It'll be something akin to that enables data to be shared. But crucially, we're enabling things like a farm data code, which conceptually agriculture has been behind, but operationally hasn't been possible. Now we'll make that sort of thing possible. Yeah. Okay.
Just before you just have one question there, Andrew. It's the focus on the provision of green provenance data. Is that likely to be a bit of is that the limit to which the digital twin will possibly? I understood originally there was a view that it would ultimately lead to the farmer being able to evidence or prove zero emissions or net zero emissions themselves, and then following that be in a position to sell surplus carbon credits. Is that seen as a
at an individual level? No, that is still the process. At an individual level, a farmer, and I'm sure, was that you, David Dunn, asking that question?
It was Greg Lang, just
hi, Greg. Yeah, no, that's still the process. Each farmer needs to understand what their emissions are on their farm, identify what areas on their farm can bring them up to net zero, and therefore allow their commodities to go into supply chains without a penalty, or potentially by getting a premium from their supply chain if they're net zero. We do also imagine that not just do you want to get net zero and then sell offsets, but your supply chain is likely, because of its strong relationship with the farmers, is likely to say, well, instead of selling your surplus carbon on the ERF to polluters, we'd like to buy it alongside with buying your wool or your wheat or your beef. So it'll end up, I think, that farmers still want to get to net zero. Farmers still want to be able to run a project that enables them to prove that they're net zero, but just that they'll probably want to retire their credits to show their net zero, inset their credits with their supply chain before they go out to the offset market and sell it to polluters. The price will always, be the best price that we can get for members, because that's in their interest. But
it's the same data, Greg. So like there'll be additional data, but we kind of start with a data set that enables a farmer to kind of understand their environmental assets, and those environmental assets include carbon, and that carbon could be used in a number of different ways, is what he's saying. So it could be used for green provenance, it could be used for environmental markets, but absolutely the idea is that your environmental assets are evidenced through your data, and that data set, what we're trying to do is to create it in such a way that you can use it, collect it once, use it many times.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't sort of terminating its objectives, the digital twins objectives, at sort of green provenance collection only. But I think you've explained to me how that you see that as just more of a continuum of information flow rather than stopping at one particular level only. It can ultimately lead through to the same achievement of their carbon credit potential.
That makes it easier, I think. You're collecting information once for multiple purposes. I'm aware of time, and I'm going to ask us to just somehow we've managed to go from there to there. So Regen Digital, thank you, Rowan, for the presentation. financials again. Sorry, Ryan, this is you. I should have got you to share screen. Do you want me to bring it up?
Yep. There's not too much to report. We just scroll down to the income. Stop. All right, income statement. We only got our first customers, members on just prior to the 30th of June. So per our expectation, and as we said we'd do when we had our capital raising, we were aiming to get the digital twin platform up by 30th of June, and we did manage to do that. And so hence we had a little bit of revenue come in prior to 30th of June. The principal costs relate to employee expenses, and there's not a hell of a lot more going on with respect to that. In the balance sheet, you can see that we've raised 500,000 less issue costs, and that the cost of operating the business across the 6 months to 30th of June were the 288,000, so giving us a total equity of 187, and that was basically held in cash at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. And do you want to talk to the bridging finance?
We should probably mention it. So yes, as of so the 500,000 enabled us to pay for running costs of Regen Digital, and also the development of Regen, the support that Regen Farmers Mutual was providing Regen Digital. That took us through till to round about November, December. But so we needed to raise some additional funding ahead of what we're trying to do now, is to raise a more significant amount of capital to enable for the growth of the group, basically. So what we need to do is to transition from startup through to scale up, if you like. And in order to provide the leeway to cover our operating costs, and to remove any stress with respect to financing our operations while we undertake the capital raising, we undertook a bridging finance round in October, November. And so we're able to get 300,000 through a convertible note that provides for basically funding through to April, May next year, which we see is the kind of time frame we need in order to be able to raise. We've currently got we're talking to a number of corporates in the market, and we're basically looking to raise 2.5 years kind of operating costs. Is the way we've kind of structured it. So we're looking to get funding of around about $5 million for the growth of Regen Digital and Regen Farmers Mutual Group in total. And so this bridging finance was to enable that to occur. On why? And so this is the summary document?
Yeah, the summary document. I can send this out with the video recording, as I'm aware of time, mate.
Yep.
So, yeah. Why aren't you moving? There we go. Bridging finance, fundraising. I think, Alan, good news. We've run out of presentations, so I think we're into, there's no votes to be cast today. There's probably a close and any final comment.
Yeah, just before we do that, I see there's a question from Stephanie in the meeting chat.
Yes,
we've got 1 minute to address that. It says, I assume a group, thanks for the presentation, I assume a group like McDonald's would pay Regen Digital to provide the data McDonald's or others requires to enable it to calculate their Scope 3 emissions.
Yes, in short, not directly McDonald's. They work in Australia with a group called Fulton Marketing Group, who've run this expressions of interest process that we submitted to, and we put a quote in for the work to be able to do a pilot, I think, of 50 farmers and 2 processors to have their aggregated twins. And that's how we've funded the first pilot. We think we'll enlarge the pilot with funds that will come from the Traceability Hub from the government and the Open Team Network, who are also interested in how that aggregation piece will work. But yes, McDonald's are that's ultimately paying.
Yeah, McDonald's and others in future, hopefully. Okay, well, if that is it, Rowan, Morty, it's just left to me to close. We've got literally less than a minute, so I'll do it very quickly. Thanks to everybody for joining the AGM. And again, thanks from Morty, myself, and Rowan as directors to those that are supporting the business. We look forward to working, with you, for you, in the months and the years ahead on what is a very exciting journey. And I'm seeing comments such as excellent, great work, very exciting. Congratulations, fantastic work. Looking forward to it. So yes, all very positive, and we will continue to work diligently in that regard. One final comment I don't believe I said at the start of this meeting. Given the maturing nature of this business, we will be extending the board of Regen Digital to five directors, and we're already looking at that and talking to one or two individuals who would be suitable for such a position. And we'll let you know all about that in due course. That's it for me. Anything else, Wardy, Ryan?
Just now, Katrina has thrown up a question on existing opportunities for the equity crowdfunding shareholders to participate in the subsequent raise.
And so the current thinking for the capital raising is we're actually looking to undertake a convertible note raising. So we from corporates basically. And so the thinking being that we actually don't want to raise equity today at today's valuation. We'd like to raise equity at a larger valuation down the track, if you like. So in order to maximize the kind of the equity stake that current equity holders have. So that's the way we've currently structured it. We've got, with three corporates currently, we've got a proposal, very loosely defined proposal, in the sense of we've got a sorry, my brain is just not working. Proposal to raise basically $5 million in the form of a convertible note that these three corporates would invest in. So there won't be an opportunity under that structure for shareholders to participate in a rights offer, because we're not actually currently looking to raise money through an equity round, in short.
Okay, I think that is it. Thank you. Alan, thank you for your closing comments. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to press end record.